All right, it's time for another district breakdown. We are moved to Arlington, the Arlington ISD District 86A. I'm joined by Diggsy again. Diggsy, this is a tough district to pick a long playoff run out of. Man, if I had told you, hey, pick one of these teams to go 3 rounds deep, you'll probably be absolutely silent and wouldn't say a word to me, and then all of a sudden we have a silent podcast. But tell me who you think is at least going to win this district, and then their chances of maybe going a round or two.
I think there's going to be a lot of focus and internal pressure in that Arlington Martin community because last year didn't really go the way that Arlington Martin wanted. A new coach over there, kind of what I call that Trinity pressure. When you're taking over from a legend, everybody's expecting you to, why aren't you like this? And I think this year is opportunity for Arlington Martin to kind of establish a little bit more of their tone. I like Arlington Martin still at the top of this district. I know a lot of people are kind of talking about a dark horse, and we'll talk about that dark horse at number two, but they've got a lot of good players coming back. Last year they were very young, and I think that was a contributing factor to why Arlington Martin didn't have the Arlington Martin like success. Everybody is talking about this defensive lineman Jesse Ford. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking Myles Garrett kind of comparisons to him, which is obviously good company to be in. But I mean, they've also got their quarterback coming back in Brooks Bergantz, who had 1,000 yards passing, 846 yards rushing, and 19 touchdowns last year. And they've got Dalen Cobb coming back, their running back, who had 670 yards and 7 touchdowns. And they got two really talented receivers coming back. So a lot of that offensive infrastructure is there. When you got Jesse Ford on the defensive line, I mean, you can just, it's like playing 12 on 11 on defense with him out there. So I think Arlington Martin in this district for me is still that team. So I think they're at the top of the district. I know a lot of people are excited about, and I'm excited about. We saw our preseason rankings, which are up on all of our social medias, and people were asking me, "Why do you have Arlington Bowie ranked?" Because I am huge. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of Arlington Bowie this year, just because of everything they've got coming back. They've got Larry Nichols, their quarterback, coming
Yeah.
back, 1,800 yards. But one thing I worry about with him is he had 10 touchdowns last year, Ward, but 9 interceptions. I know that's a ratio you are
I don't like those
absolutely.
ratios. I
You
don't
don't
like
like
those
those ratios.
fractions. No, go ahead. I don't
That's a
like it.
bad fraction. But they got Darian Bowers, the incredible running back, first team running back coming back, who had 1,200 yards last year and 14 touchdowns. Larry Nichols also ran for another 300 yards. And Dylan Talley, the really talented wide receiver
Yeah.
who's getting all kinds of college buzz, 560 yards. Zion Shelley has come out of the woodwork as a tight end. And they got a really good offensive lineman who's one of the Dallas Morning News top 100 players in Ian Mays. So
Yep.
there's a lot to be excited about over at Arlington Bowie. And Arlington Bowie and Martin last year was a 1 point down to the nail biter game. So I can see why people think that Bowie is poised to overtake Martin. But Martin was just as young last year as Bowie. So I think Martin has just a little bit of an edge for me.
Yeah. All the players you mentioned now on Bowie were on one side of the ball. I'm nervous about the defensive side where they bring back up maybe four to six. I forget what it was, but it's not a lot, and they're going to be young there too. But I do also like Bowie. Interested to see what you think about Haltom coming into this district. I mean, obviously they're not in Arlington ISD or Grand Prairie ISD. And then Coach Tucker, he's been known to do stuff when he has talented players, but it's just so rare for him to have highly talented players over there. So how do you think Haltom will do in this district, and why do you think they're there?
Haltom appealed a couple of years ago for basketball and the other sports, and they won their appeal. And for some reason, the UIL has drawn that map to make this work. I think it's one of the crazier alignments. Haltom works much better in many other districts. And I know people are like, well, it's a 7, they can kind of fit in with an 8 and kind of keep everything 8. Well, when does the UIL place that logic? We talked about the 2 weeks ago in 6-6A, they got a 9-team district. So, you can find random spots in other places. You got 9s and 7s all over the place. So I don't like this alignment. I think Haltom should be with the South Lake teams, or maybe even with the North Crowley teams in 3-6A like they were 2 realignments ago. I have a hard time really finding players to get excited about with Haltom.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be in the lower tier. Vudrico Roberson is kind of the player that I'm looking at, who was a kind of an all-purpose threat last year, 360 yards rushing, 100 yards receiving. But again, you talked about how Haltom tends to do things and they've got the talent. I don't see the talent this year. A couple of the teams I do think have a bit of talent. I think Arlington, South Grand Prairie, and Arlington Lamar, kind of like we talked about last week in 7-6A. I think as a 5-team race for 4 playoff teams. And last year we saw this. We had a 3-way tie with, we had to get to point differential. I know, Ward, you don't like having to get the abacus out and
I
trying to
like it.
create this point differential stuff. I think you could see a very similar thing this year because especially with Arlington and Arlington Lamar, they return everybody. Arlington Lamar did lose a really talented player to Euless Trinity, but they still got their quarterback Gannon Carey coming back, 1,900 yards. We talk about ratios, Ward. 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions.
Woo.
They got to stop that. They got to stop the turnovers and letting other teams have extra possessions. But their wide receiver as a freshman last year, Trenton Yancey, I mean, talk about a player that jumped out of nowhere as a freshman, which is really hard to do in 6A. 816 yards receiving, 191 yards rushing, over 1,000 total yards as a player. He's going to be like those grapevine kids we had for 4 years. And in 2027 and 2028, he's going to be like a friend of ours, Ward.
Exactly. Be there looking for that bobblehead each and every year. But will he get it? I don't know. That leaves, what does that leave us? That leaves Sam Houston and Grand Prairie, who, Grand Prairie had a little flash there when they had Savion Red, but again, it's one of those deals. If they don't have the talent coming through, I don't know what you can do to make it a playoff team. But talk about those two teams as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got Grand Prairie. Braylon Smith returns for Grand Prairie, 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. Xavier Rodriguez is a player that's starting to get a little steam in the recruiting world. Kevin Moore is a player to watch out for at Grand Prairie with wide receiver. It's numbers, it's defense. Grand Prairie is going to struggle with that. Sam Houston is probably going to be at the bottom of the district. Chauncey Price is a player to keep an eye on for Sam Houston. But, I think there's tiers to this, and I think you're going to see these 3 teams, Haltom, Grand Prairie, and Sam Houston at the bottom tier. But a couple players to mention, kind of upstream in the second tier. South Grand Prairie is a team that is always kind of maddening to us because we don't really know what we're going to get with them. They got hit by graduation quite a bit, but they've got quarterback Dalen Brooks coming back, and they got running back Josiah Lucas, and I think that core could potentially make them challenge with the rest of their talent for a playoff spot. And Arlington returns quite a bit. They have the 2-headed monster, Ward. And we talk about in the podcast, I do not like the 2-headed quarterback system. They had Mason Hensley and Coleman Cravens kind of rotating last year. I don't know if he's any relation to Cravens Field over there in Arlington ISD, but Coleman Cravens had 270 yards rushing and 555 yards passing. Mason Hensley was more of the thrower, and they got Jamar Burton coming back, Isaiah Robertson coming back. Isaiah Robertson, the SMU commit, probably their best player, 470 yards receiving last year, 200 yards rushing. And that's what Arlington has done the last 6 to 7 years. They just got talent, Ward, and they find a way to get them on the field, whether it's running back, wide receiver, kind of gadget plays. So Arlington's got the talent, but defense, I think you're going to see a lot of high-scoring games in this district because there's a lot of other than Jesse Ford at Martin, there's not really those game-breaker defensive players in this district.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's interesting. I don't know if you really committed yet to the 4 playoff teams, but you're going to do it now. Give me your 1 through 8.
I got number 1, Arlington Martin. Number 2, Arlington Bowie. I've got number 3, South Grand Prairie. I've got number 4, Arlington Lamar. I got Arlington just on the inside, on the outside looking in at number 5. I've got Haltom number 6, Grand Prairie number 7, and Sam Houston at number 8.
Sam Houston. All right, next week we're going to Garland. 9-6.
Region 2, Ward, our last
Moving
region
to Region
of this
2.
Campfire series.
And very well could be, some people would argue, the best player in the states out of 9-6A. I probably wouldn't be one to argue it, but it will be there.
We've been very disrespectful at the mouth about Garland ISD and that district. I think this district is going to be a lot better, and you're going to have to tune in next week to hear why.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, Diggsy, see you next week.
See you down the road.